I will share the screen. Okay, and I will open this up. And okay, I did this talk 2 or 3 years ago, and it's been quite heavily modified. I found this old drawing in my research fairly early. There was no date on it, but it would have been fairly early in when white man rolled up to Australia. Excuse me, and so they were drawn as savages, which they really weren't. And so I thought I'll put that in Aboriginal Technologies. So this is what this is about. The technologies, this little rectangle here is very interesting, starting in Africa where humans arose, went to the Middle East and Asia, and from there to Australia. Middle East went to Europe, and then to Americas across that strait, which was the land bridge at one stage. But this also shows different, let's say, people of different times through the history. So Australopithecus here, and it shows that there weren't. I mean, there's the timeline, the black line, and Boise and Africanus, Australopithecus Africanus, and so on. And that's Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis. Now, we've covered Lucy last time, and where is she? In there. So all these eventually changing the Australopithecines, and then Homo started, and Homo erectus was the first one to actually walk like we do. And that goes back to about, what's that? I'm trying to remember the scale of the thing. But anyway, it wouldn't be...
that shows 1.8 million.
1.8, yeah, it's about that. 1.8 million, yeah. You're right. Oh, here we are. Started a million years ago. That's what I was looking for. So we separated from the apes, from the chimps rather, about 6 million years ago. And between 6 million and about 2 million were all these other, and much earlier than those as well. We covered that last time. Now, as we go around, time goes through, but what this slide is about, the different technologies made mostly stone, fire. That took a while to develop, and it wasn't until fire was developed that man was able to cook the food rather than eat it raw. And that means he was eating a lot more protein and a lot more fat, and that gave the body's system to develop much more, and the brain has got a huge amount of fat in it. So that led to the development of the brain getting bigger and bigger, and instead of having a flat forehead, it's become vertical. So, okay, and once that happens, you got they found all sorts of tools and other things. Even here, in Japan, people there, they found old stone tools and so on. So all these stone flakes, all these other things. Now in Australia, they found serrated edges, so they were able to not only take flint, the type of stone that actually you can use as spear heads, and they use them for tools, but they also were able to serrate them so they can cut better. So that was a very early development there. Then they brought in ivory, and bone needles. So they were able to sew, and so on. Herbal medicines came in. They developed boats and musical instruments made of bone. Okay, so basically, boomerang came around there, and various. Well, I'm sure you had a look at this. I hope you have a look at it. If not, you know what this is about. Go back and have a look. I think I put it into the notes. I'm pretty sure I did. Okay, so let's have a look. Now, they did a massive genomic study of Australian Aborigines, and that modern humans all descended from a single wave of migrants that left Africa about 72,000 years ago. And that lot eventually got to Australia about 65,000 years ago, maybe a little bit earlier. Okay, so about that time, some of the continents were still very close together. So Asia and Australia, they were very close. Aborigines never set off on a boat unless they could see where they were going, and so they had these primitive boats. If they could see where they were going, they got there. So they were very, very concerned about going somewhere. They had no idea what's beyond the horizon. So this massive continent, Sahul, contained Tasmania and Australia and New Guinea. So it was all very close, and they could just virtually either walk across, or they were very close with waterwise. And they picked up Neanderthals' DNA, the Denisovans' DNA, and other extinct hominids along the way. So, which means that they were interacting and having kids with these earlier forms. And the Denisovans are actually, well, we talked about it last week anyway, but the last time. We'll leave that. All right. So they lived in WA about 65,000 years ago. Okay, so they came across from New Guinea or thereabouts, and they came through. And the reason we say about 65,000 years is because they did a lot of cave drawings and rock drawings, and they used clays of different colors and ochres, and they're able to date what they use, the pigments that they use at the time, from the walls that they had painted on or drawn on. And the thing is, if it was underground, without going into too much chemistry, when sand or things that are underground are brought out, they release some of the energy, sun energy that they had trapped, and by doing that, they're able to work out the amount and the rate that it is released at. It's not fast at all, and that's how the 65,000 years came about. So it's all dating of the paintings or the drawings that the early Aborigines produced. Now the Aborigines and the Papuans, so the split from the main group about 58,000. So that by that stage the land mass has separated even more, so they just weren't in communication anymore. And yeah, so then that means that reproduction between the two, the matings, no longer occurred between the Aboriginal and Papuans, and then they evolved further on, but separately. And so they split. Well, they said that here it's about, in one document I read 58, another one I read 37, so I don't know which one it is, but it's a long time ago. And they find the continents were finally cut off about 8,000 years ago. But they separated because the amount that the genetics showed that somewhere along the way, they separated, they stopped communicating with each other. And that includes having kids. Now, the other thing is there's a lot of genetic diversity between the Aborigines in the East and the West, because they slowly traveled from west to east, and that includes down south and up north and up through the center. So different streams of them, and because they were separated, they developed their own genetic characteristics, but it's very slow development. If any of you are into genealogy, is anyone into genealogy? Anyway, when they say you've got so much percentage of Aborigine, you got so much percentage of Hungarian, so much percentage of whatever, it all works through the DNA of the mitochondria. Now, mitochondria were once, a long millions of years ago, little bacteria type organisms, which took up they were picked up by other cells which had problems producing energy, and it became a symbiotic situation where you had these very primitive cells and these primitive bacteria coming in together, and they've been living together happily ever after. The mitochondria have their own DNA. And because mitochondrial DNA changes or mutates much more slowly than body DNA, there's a secret. They have mapped the DNA of different parts of in mitochondrial DNA from different parts of the world. So if you have family from mostly Europe, they can actually, if in Russia or in Italy or wherever it might be, there'll be little changes to your DNA, your mitochondrial DNA. But if you're from Africa and you look at, say, North American Indians, there's quite a diversity because it took a long time to get from Africa to America. And and then that's how they do that. So maybe I'll stop there.
Just before you go on, I have a question. Human DNA's got its own DNA, and the mitochondria have got their own DNA.
Correct.
When humans reproduce,
yes,
how do we pass on mitochondrial DNA?
An excellent question. Excellent. The egg that the mother produces has its own mitochondria, and the cell has its somatic or the cell type DNA, but half the not the mitochondrial, the cell DNA is half, like we do, so you get half from the female, half from the male, but the sperm do not carry mitochondria. So all our mitochondria.
I've often wondered that. Excellent.
Okay, you got the rest? Yeah. So anyway, so all our mitochondria are maternal. Okay, now there was an ice age 30 to 20,000 years ago, and it finished about 10,000 years ago. And the Aborigines that went down to what is now Tasmania were cut off. So because of the ice age, they also adapted certain characteristics to allow them to survive in that ice age. And they were able, and desert people, were able to survive at sub-zero temperatures without showing any metabolic changes. I don't know if you've done any touring in Central Australia. I remember years ago we went, and we were told that they brought the dogs, the dingoes, from New Guinea. The dingoes are not Australian natives, and they kept a few of them. Every family had a few of them, quite a few, and they talked about, one dog night, two dog night, three dog nights. They got when they're lying down and it's cold, the colder it is, the more dogs they got to lie next to them and kept them warm. So they were able to survive. They found really good ways, and they have different metabolic rates to what we do. But a lot of Aborigines today are not, most of them are not pure blood. And so it probably varies. So by the time the Ice Age developed, there were already Tasmanian Aborigines, and they were separated for a long, long time, about 10,000 years. And because they were genetically isolated, they had their own mutations. So they look different. If you look at even, what was her name? The queen, the last queen of the, I can't remember. Anyway, her face is quite different, and her hair and so on. There's certain characteristics which are different to the mainland Aborigines. Now, this is a map I found just a couple of weeks ago, where there were refuges that found that certain parts were not as cold as other parts. So these things, according to this map, were called refuges. So the bulk of the country were not populated because it's just far too cold. But they had certain areas which were warmer, and these were the barriers within which they lived. But they were like this, like the capital cities, if you like, even in the centre. Okay, so this gives you an idea of how. And even there, they were separated from each group. Each group was separated from the other groups. But once it started warming up at the end of the Ice Age, then things then they moved around a fair bit. Okay. Now, so it says here that when the climate cooled dramatically, they sought refuge in well-watered areas, rivers. Populations were condensed into small areas. So once Earth started warming up and the ice melted, the sea began to rise. Bass Strait filled. Tassie Aborigines were then lost contact. And remember this: if you're standing at the most southern part of Victoria, you can't see Tasmania, and so they couldn't see it. The guys who lived here, they didn't go south, and the guys in the south didn't go north, so they were separated. So their genome changed. A genome is the word for the collective genetic information. And so they moved through, the mainland people just moved through the country, and then as everything warmed up, the animals and the plants just grew, and everything was as it is now. So that's sort of an initial thing. Because they've been here so long, and they were very clever, they developed certain technologies. So houses, shelters, household utensils, food, medicine, the hunting ways, fishing, farming, weapons, musical instruments, toys, whatever. And this is what I want to go through. So Their shelters were designed depending on where they lived and the seasons that they had. And the ceremonial functions with family groupings also affected the types of shelters that they had. So depending on if they were far north Queensland, if there was in Victoria or WA, or wherever they were, everything was different because the country is just too big. They moved around a lot to follow the food. But so here, a few examples I found. So in the Torres Strait Islands, very distinctive, they're called the beehive shape and made from thatching, the grass over bamboos. So I have no idea when the photos that I took, I mean, where I got them from didn't give an indication of time. So there are three. There's a person here on the right, and these two to give you an idea of the size of this hut. But it looks like an African-style hut too. So it's warm. Here, this is in the Atherton Tablelands in far north Queensland. It's coming down a bit. These shelters, they're from cane and branches all lashed together, and then they use grass and leaves or bark to cover them, so they were rainproof. The Atherton Tablelands are very wet. The Arnhem Land further west. So they had these peg-supported paperbark windbreaks there. This I'd say is a drawing of from some time. This is a photo. Again, there's no idea of time there. But if you look at the dresses the woman's wearing, I don't know, late 1800s, early 1900s. And they also included built platforms to protect them against the effect of flooding. And that's why if you not so much today, but when we had family in Brisbane, so we went up quite often, and they had these Queensland buildings. They were called Queenslanders, and they were on stilts. And so if it flooded, they were fine. They were saved. In Tasmania, they used the environment. So rock shelters, caves, overhangs. They didn't seem to build much. If they did, they only took whatever was there, but they just kept moving on around. But it must have been terrible in the south. In Tassie, it's so cold. So they must have had way to keep themselves warm, but so I suppose caves were probably the best they could do. In eastern Tasmania, they then windbreaks from large sheets of bark, the stripped bark, and made them, and they were rested against a curved bough of a tree. Again, it's a very primitive way of doing it, like this. Here's a photo in a museum. It serves a purpose. You could have a fire inside because it had a little chimney and a little opening at the top. It's had, they called it in the teeth of the roaring 40s. Now, the roaring 40s are on the west coast, there's continuous wind. The 40s are the latitudes they're on. And the annual rainfall was 1.25 meters, huge. So these were sort of 3 to 5 meters in diameter. These were lean-tos, just bits of bark attached to a frame, very simple ones. This one I showed before, it's just a lean-to, and I'm sure you've heard of lean-to before. Now, they also made stone houses in Victoria, and this is a photo of what's left of them, and they've resurrected some of them. Here's a replica, And this is what they would have looked like with the stones fitting on them. And there's another one here next to it. Now, there were there weren't very many records, but this one is of Lake Conda in a village that the Aborigines had, and this is from somebody called Brow Smythe, and he had some papers about 1840. It's all handwritten. He's got his little diagrams there, and this is the blow up of the diagrams in 1840. I found I had a lot of trouble reading it, so I just stopped. And but you notice that because I've got little holes at the top, may have rained in, but they were able to also keep warm with low-level fires. Now, so then I went back to follow this thing. And this writing here on the left is this. So I just copied it. It says, Blacks about 50 miles northeast of Port Fairy by what is termed the Scrubby Creek before settlers came along. Among them had a regular village. My informant who drew this states that there were between 20 to 30, evidently some of them big enough to hold a dozen people. Their shape as under an aperture at top to let out smoke, which in rainy weather they covered with large sod. Now, I am not sure what sod is. I thought it was sort of dirt, but I can't see them covering that with. Anyway, they formed like a beehive about 6 feet high, plus or minus, and about 10 feet in diameter. So it's a decent size construction. An opening about 3 feet for a doorway, which they could close at night with a piece of bark. There, blacks made regular dams in creeks to catch fish. They could make straw nets with their basket, and their baskets were different. Okay, so and by fish, you'll see later that they're actually eels. Tools and implements reflect the geographic location because they made their tools out of whatever they could find. So these ones here, and where you can see they're made of stone, and these were probably for throwing at people. I don't know, but you got these. They had some sort of gems, I suppose, and they were able to make either weapons out of them or cutting tools. You can see the edges on these. So these tools varied according to where they had the locations, but they said they had knives, scrapers, axe heads, spears, all sorts of vessels for eating and drinking and digging. So they could do whatever we do. And if they needed something, if they thought they needed something, they looked for something to use to make whatever they wanted to do. Here's some more. They used, they were the first to introduce ground edges for cutting tools to grind seeds. They actually shaped this cutting tool here on the left. These are 2 world firsts in stone technology. And they also use it for things like to prepare food. So they had these indents where they could grind their food, they could chop their food, chop the wood for fire, and they could prepare skins. They had all this amazing technology, basic, but they thought it through and came up with things. Now, they had stone fish traps for use in rivers and with the water, but these were tidal rivers. And the fish traps were woven from various fibers. In southwest Victoria, near the Warrnambool area, there are remains of one of Australia's largest aquaculture systems. You can go and see it. And so what they did, these fiber work the nets, and they had traps, they had baskets, they had bags, anything they needed for fishing, hunting. And there were some of the baskets were so tightly woven that they could carry honey, they would carry water, and they're collapsible, so they're very easy to carry around. But they were expandable, they could carry food, babies, whatever they wanted to carry. And they made them from cabbage trees, quarterline. They're knotted grass stalks. String bags also used to sift seeds. They have it was called kangaroo grass, and the kangaroo grass is like a grass fairly high, and the seeds, if you touch them, they just fall off. And they used to go around collecting the seeds, grinding them, and made damper. So they were the first people to actually make bread. Oh, that's quarterline, the cabbage tree. Here's some fiber works. These are traps, fish. This one on the bottom left is an eel trap. So the eel sealed off the movement, the water. Oh, you'll see later anyway. It's a little canal channel. Everything was sealed off except for that. And if the eel wanted to move through, they moved through, and they were picked up at the other end. All these things, it looks like, carry bottles in that. Whatever, they didn't have bottles, of course, but look at the fine work. This was so much fun researching for this talk. I've learned a lot about the technologies, all this, these incredible artifacts, baskets. Now, the Coolgardie safe, you've heard of the Coolgardie safe, you haven't today. It's an Aboriginal invention, and where you had water evaporating, and when water evaporates, it takes heat out of what's inside it. So today, the Coolgardie safe is just a box with a metal mesh frame, and the top had a reservoir, and you had cloth over the top, and the water went down. As the water evaporated on the side, it cooled whatever it was. When I was a scout, we had a couple of Coolgardie safes, and we kept the butter, the milk in the Coolgardie safe hanging from a branch. And that was a little more than a couple of years ago. Maybe today they have battery operated fridges, I don't know. I was going to say, oh yeah. So the Coolgardie safe came in the 1890s when they saw what the Aborigines were doing, and and this is and that came to be what we use. They use animal skins like this, seal them off, carry water in them, and this is the wallaby skin. The seaweed, they made a water carrier, all amazing stuff. In the foods and the medicines they use was just amazing. They had medicine for everything. Everything that we have, they had in their version and worked. So they fished, hunted. There were certain seeds that they wanted, but they were poisonous. So they put them into flowing water in a basket. So the water flowed through the basket and took whatever the toxin was with it. They found moths and grubs, witchetty grubs, for example. Apparently they're very nice to eat. I can't vouch for any of that. They made sweet drinks with honey. They loved honey, nectar from plants. The grass seeds, they made damper. They used tannins from the roots. if any of you have been to the Sunshine Coast, no, I can't remember the name of a river, but there's a river with two lakes along it. It goes through, and through one section of this river, if you get on the boat, you pay. It's a little tour that you can do. They stop the boat. It's absolutely still, and the water is black, totally black, from the oh, what's wrong with me? I can't think of the plant, but the roots of this particular plant that this chemical runs into the water. It's totally harmless, but it's black, and it's like a mirror. The most beautiful. Everything is mirrored brilliantly, and they were able to. They learned how to use all this stuff to help them eat, and they ate well. So roots, and that's right. The tannins, that's what I was trying to think of. They use tannins to tan leather, but they use the tannin from the roots to treat inflammations, alkaloids for pain relief, the antiseptics from tea tree oil, so they knew that could cure infections. The latex from certain trees to treat ulcers and skin conditions. That's right. And so they found ways to yield food and bush medicine. The fish hunted, they rendered poisonous seeds edible. I mentioned that. Moths, grubs, they used to love eating them. They were special. So that men, and there's just a list. I mentioned some of them before. Yeah, okay. So let's move on to agriculture. They actually built dams. They built wells. They planted whatever they needed. They irrigated. They harvested the seeds. They preserved the surplus and stored them in special houses or sheds or vessels, which they made. And they were a regular community. They had everything that we do, they did to survive. And they survived very nicely. And they manipulated the landscape. Now, Murnon was dug up and roasted. Oh, sorry, where did I get to? Oh, sorry, I missed it. So there were two of the most important crops which they depended on was kangaroo grass and Murnon. And kangaroo grass is this seeds. They actually also sowed them and harvested them into flour, made it into bread, and it's really taking off now. You can buy kangaroo grass bread in some delis here in Melbourne. They found a grinding dish from 34,000 years ago. It doesn't need any watering, doesn't do anything. You don't fertilize it, it just grows, and people are growing them now. And I saw some time ago, someone was talking about this, and I went out to an area, and he just took his cap off, a little cap, and he just brushed it along the top, and then he poured out the seeds into his hand. They just fall off, very loose. So they domesticated this grain with 15,000 years before anyone else. The Egyptians domesticated and the Aztecs domesticated seeds and food, but these were much, much earlier. Now, Murnon is like a potato and very nutritious, and they cultivated it. It's like a potato. So this is what kangaroo grass looks like. When you touch it, and the seeds fall off. This is Murnon. It looks like that. They can see that. They dig it up, and there you are. You've got your your vegetable there. I don't know if what they cut off, what they kept, or they peeled it, but it was in the fire, so the fire probably cleaned it up, and then just ate it as a roast veggie. So when the first settlers came in Sydney, they found open grass fields, and which they said, oh, this is fantastic for sheep. But they didn't know that the Aborigines then made this field and maintained it through what's called controlled burning, for fasting farming. Now, when we had back in 2019, those terrible fires, everyone said, well, we must do a backburn, and then they got the Aborigines to do backburns for them. They knew how to do it. They still do it. And but the farming is part of this. So what they do, if there is some animal there they want to hunt, they wait for the wind to be in a particular direction. They light a bit of bush, gets very smoky. The kangaroos, the wallabies, whatever's there, we go away from the fire, the smoke, and the Aborigines, part of the group, are waiting on the other side because they're being directed, and they go right into the guys, kill the whatever animals they need. They never kill more than they needed. And so by directing the fire in a particular direction, it was like going to an abattoir. So very clever. So there we are. So we flushed them out. And then after the fire's gone through, new grasses came, and then more animals came to feed. Because if you don't do anything, everything gets out of control. Trees start to grow, and then the wallabies, the kangaroos, whatever, have problems finding food at ground level. So they've learned I don't know when, but very early to do this. And so, and people, Aborigines, are warning the officials that you've got to do what's called low intensity burning to prevent the serious fires that we've been having. They didn't have them because they were very good at that. So this is how they do it. They wait for a day when it's not hot, and they light fires and just clears it. Reduces the load. They have this aquaculture near Warrnambool. So I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but Kadajamara, the people there formed channels, and the channels are still there to harvest eels. So what is left now is these intricate stone traps. You still go and see them. And these are the guys that lived in stone houses. And you can see that it's the oldest aquaculture site in the world. And this corporation, the traditional owners, they protect these sites, and where they lived, where they farmed, they harvested, they had food, and then they also had excess food. So they traded the excess food for other things that they didn't need to make, but other people did. So 6,600 years old. The site is older than Stonehenge and the pyramids. And you can see it today. I've got photos here. This is, so you can see these canals. They brought water in from the sea, or they had lakes, depending on what stage because eels live both in fresh water and in seawater. They, like salmon, they have they change their metabolic situation to either live in salt or fresh. But this whole big system is still there, and this video, whoops, I just I'll try and show it to you. And okay, so need to share the sound. There is it. Eel traps. I think that's it. Come on. It's a volcanic reef. So after the volcano exploded, all the lava. If you can't hear it or see it, can you let me know, please?
We can't see anything, or we can hear bits and pieces, but can't see anything.
That makes it interesting. Okay, stop share. Okay, let's have a look. I'll go to the share screen and I've got the sound going. Well, I don't know what else I need to. I'll try again. Share.
Yeah, we can see.
You can see now?
Yeah.
Okay.
The country, when it
Yeah.
cooled, it cracked
Can you hear
into
it
blocks
now?
of
Yeah.
basalt.
Good.
And Aboriginal people used those blocks and used the crevices to create channels to guide water across country and encourage eels to follow those channels. And it wasn't just one channel, it was a network of channels gradually guiding all these eels into compounds where they could be harvested.
At Lake Conda in Western Victoria, there was a mystery. We're being told Aborigines were nomads, yet here, the Aborigines claim their ancestors lived in a permanent village. A village so sophisticated, they farmed eels in these swamps, they processed them, and even exported them across the country. It's a serious challenge to our understanding of Aboriginal history. There appeared to be countless artificial channels crisscrossing the landscape.
This has had to be excavated. This channel is an artificial channel that has come through the lava flow, through the sheer rock, to bring the water from this swamp into that swamp.
In fact, there appeared to be artificial ponds here as well. But it was hard to make sense of all this because the entire area was drained in the 1800s when Europeans moved in. But Heather had an idea. She measured up every little hill and valley in the landscape, entered all the information into a geography simulation program, and then reflooded the land on computer. That way, she could see where all the artificial channels led. The computer program revealed a dazzling picture. An artificial system of ponds connected by canals covering more than 75 square kilometres of the landscape.
I realised that there's something pretty clever going on here.
There were so many eels, and they had had this paradise created for them of shallow water, which they loved. You know, for them, that was just like heaven, warm, shallow water to feed in. So Aboriginal people were harvesting those eels in those compounds.
And carbon dating revealed these channels were built up to 8,000 years ago.
That is pretty amazing in prehistorically in the world about controlling a resource or environment for aquaculture. Yeah, it could be one of the oldest systems in the world.
The telltale sign of an eel trap is two piles of rocks in straight lines. Woven basket-like nets were placed in the gap where the water once flowed.
This would have come in here, and understand that it would have been about 4 times as big as this now.
For this trap.
Yes, and it would have fitted in. There would have been a frame here, a wooden frame.
The eels swam in one end and someone caught them when they came out the other. Heather had noticed that there were a lot of trees that had obviously had fires in them. Could it be that the Gunditjmara smoked eels in them to preserve them for export? She took a soil sample deep down where the soil was contaminant-free to see if a lab could find traces of eel. But after putting it in the fridge overnight, she was greeted by a remarkable surprise the next morning.
And the next day, when we went to open the door, the whole room stank of smoked eel. And I knew, that was a eureka moment, because I knew that was right. And the fact that if all these trees meant that people had been using them, there was preservation, suddenly the whole picture changed. Gunditjmara weren't just catching eels, the whole society was based around eels, and that was, like, to me, the proof. That was it.
So there was a big industry. It wasn't just catch an eel, cook an eel. It was catch an eel, preserve an eel, smoke an eel, and trade the eel. So it was an economy based on the eels. And it was all based on this engineered network of channels and ponds and weirs. It's amazing. You can go and see it.
Oh, that's quite amazing.
Isn't it? Yep. I've got the link to this and the notes I sent you. Hi, David. Okay, let's go back to. Okay, so that's all right. So going back. This Aboriginal corporation that was set up, and at a UNESCO meeting, it was added to the World Heritage Site list. Here's a photo. So, so the water was flowing from left to right. The eel would go in, and the guys were standing at the other end just to pick them up one at a time. An eel trap. The other sorts of traps that they had bird traps like ducks, geese. They had these woven nets. The birds flew into them. There were fish nets, and even sort of not ones that are carried, but one across a creek or a smallish river, so they caught food. Here's this is about 1910, North Queensland. 1910, I'm not sure if they wove the net or they were able to buy it, but they had this same system going. And around Australia, I found this information about what they did with fish. So with shellfish, they chewed the shellfish, and the shape, these shiny shells, were used as bait. So, like, I'm not a fish person in any way, but a lot of the lures that the today fishing people use, a shiny, where they move around in the water and they pick up the sun and so on. They did it then in Arnhem Land and in the territory. Excuse me. And the people, they wove these barrier nets to trap fish. So we saw that in Victoria, mostly the eels. In Queensland, Torres Strait, they used spears and harpoons. And some of the spears were made using human hair and stingray barbs. In Tassie, they stopped catching fish about 3,500 years ago and focused on shellfish. So, because in Tassie, there's lots of these middens where they threw the shellfish once they've eaten its contents. In South Australia, they use little barks, little bark canoes to fish. And the women use rafts that they made to collect freshwater mussels. So they walked through these shallow areas and they just threw the mussels or whatever else that they picked up onto this small raft. In southern Victoria, they would cook most of their food, with the exception of shellfish and snails, marine snails, which they have raw. And in Victoria, they also had these small clay fire pits in the canoe, and they cooked whatever they caught to provide fish attracting light at night. Today these guys go out and they spotlight, so the fish are attracted to the light and they catch them. They knew about it hundreds, thousands of years ago. The canoes were fabricated from a single piece of bark shaped over fire. The fire makes them a bit more malleable. And then over the history of all this, and they understood and they valued how important water resources are. So they had clan laws, and they had customs where they were ensured the fish were harvested sustainably. There was no such thing as overfishing. So here we have the left, a South Australian canoe. So this one here, I have to move my thing. Oh, that's from Southeast Australia, a bark canoe.
Lost the sound.
Oh yes, okay, sorry. I had to move that thing out of the way so I could see where that photo came from. So hunting, well, I can go back a bit. I think this animal here is a dugong. It gave, this is what sailors took for being mermaids. I don't know if you know the stories, but it's worth looking up. Dugong hunting, this is far north Queensland, north of Cairns. Boomerangs were very useful for many things. This was one of the tools they used for hunting, but also in ceremonies. Even today, you see what various ceremonies Aborigines involved. They have the boomerangs there, clapping, making a clapping sound. That can easily kill a small animal or knock a larger one down. They work. The shape of a boomerang is exactly the same as the shape of a bird's wing, which they also use to fly aeroplanes with. So they're flat on the bottom and they're curved on the top. So as they go through, I don't know if you know, the basic theory is that if you use an aeroplane, for example, when an aeroplane is flying, the air under the wing just goes straight through. But over the wing, because it's curved, the air has got further to go. So the air pressure drops markedly. And so because underneath the wing, it's normal air, we get this uplift. And then that's how the birds stay up and the airplanes stay up. And the Aborigines knew this, and that's how they made their boomerangs. They have different sorts of boomerangs depending on what they use them for. So in the desert, they use heavy wood from the mulga, and you can use it when they were hunting kangaroos, something heavy. And the lighter ones in New South Wales, they made from the mangrove trees, and they're used for duck hunting. So here are different shapes and sizes of boomerangs, and and the bird hunting one, the bottom left here, is it actually the bird gets caught in it, and it's and brought down to ground. And they had sport, the who could do what with the boomerangs, and these were specially designed boomerangs. So these ones here are still used for hunting water birds, and it always comes back to dry land, especially when it's cold. That saves them walking through cold water. Spears were very useful for hunting, fishing, and fighting, and some were made from a single piece of wood, but depending on where you were in the country. So Aborigines had very long spears, about 6 meters, and they had for fishing, but for seals, they used short, stumpy ones that could get up close to them. Others were made from oh gosh. There were spears made from one or more parts attached to a wooden shaft. It's in Tassie. They had composite spears in central and northern parts of Australia and the Kimberleys. They had detachable barbed spears in the southwest of the centre all the way to Cape York. Multi-pronged spears were used in North and Southeast Australia for fishing. And this is a quote from 2000. Spear shafts were bound with yakka, with a xanthoria. It's called a grass tree, but it's the gum, the sap, and kangaroo sinews, which they were able to strip from their food. Apart from fighting spears, they had 6 meter long canoe spears and short, stumpy spears for seals. Okay, that's why I got the other, but just to show a little bit more detail. So you can see here, so that they wound their whatever they use for the pointy bits. They had the wound with tendons, and then used wax, hot wax, to seal it with. And you can see the different shapes for different purposes, and all these were different sorts of spears. I assume this bottom one, second from the bottom, was for the seals. I'm not quite, I don't have the imagination to work out the very bottom one and the second from the top, unless something get caught in between, because I've got this backward facing barbs in this second one. So all over the world they use spears, but in other Australians developed the woomera. Well, I've got a woomera somewhere. I went to Central Australia, bought one. Oh, I forgot to dig it out. Anyway, so it's a spear thrower, and so it gives a much more leverage to the I think something happening there. I think we just got some visitors. So it levers the length of the arm and makes it the arm longer, so you get a much greater force behind the spear, and it goes a lot further. So this is the woomera and spear were the fastest weapons in the world before the invention of the self-loading rifle. How's that? And they were all multi-purpose, because they could be fitted with this. So these woomeras, you could put a stone in it for cutting, or axe-like. You can have if you had a good woman, you could hunt, chop wood, cut down branches to make shelter, and chop up meat. Lightweight, easy to carry around, and very important. So you had these Swiss Army knife style tools that they made for themselves. Okay, so this what a woman looks like. Left part is with the hand, with the handle bit, and here there's a little notch at the top, a little bit of twig, and this is what it looks like at the bottom right, and it's got sinew, and the so if you know anything about fulcrums, this is the end, and you hold this bit, and by swinging it over his head, the spear just goes very fast, long distance. It says here the force generated by the throw is 4 times that used by a modern compound bow. The woman increases the distance that a spear can travel by up to 3 times. So their technology was just fantastic. They had a lot of time to devise it, but when they got it, they did it. They also had thermoplastic resins, which we use today even. So things from porcupine grass, well, this on the bottom left, or xanthoria, the grass trees. And so they beat the resin out of the grass and cleaned it, heated it over the fire, and created a sticky black substance. And when it cooled, it became very, very hard and strong. So they could actually manipulate it while it was soft and sticky, and they could bind rock or wood to it and whatever they needed to fix or to make tools or spears, boomerangs, whatever they needed. So they had this, and they could do it. Now, they also have these special shields, and but they weren't allowed to carry that until they had the initiation. And they were used for close quarter fighting. And they also used to deflect spears when they were at some level of war. But they weren't really at war. It was really to show who's the boss. And they said it was often theatrical and orchestrated. Usually when someone was seriously injured or killed, the whole thing was stopped. So nice way to do it. Very civilized. Here the shields rather. And they had little handles you could hold them. And these were parrying shields. The handle there. And then this one's called a little club. Very nasty. But also notice the lovely designs on them. So move this down. So from northeast Queensland, these were constructed in the 1890s to mid 1900s. So these were from photos from a museum in Queensland, and and these one right here from South Australia. I don't know where, but again, this is another museum. These are just photos I found. So they actually, these particular ones were like spear shields, and they're made from the outer bark of a red gum, which is usually, they can't be too heavy, but they need to be strong enough to stop the spear going through them. Music was a big thing, the didgeridoo, and they were played by men, and only after they were old enough. And it's said to be the world's oldest wind instrument. It's very simple. The wood is hollowed out, the fine timber that's been hollowed out by termites. And and the certain wider at the bottom, so it's like a brass instrument or a wood instrument where it sort of becomes wider at the bottom and creates a particular resonance. And they have the circular breathing system. I tried it really hard. So you can breathe in, but before you breathe in, you fill your cheeks up with air so that you can blow the air out from the mouth at the same time you breathe into your lungs. So you don't never stop. It's called circular breathing. Some of you know I play a brass instrument, and I have to breathe. But when I take a quick breath, there's this tiny pause, which they don't have to do with that. They also have these rhythm sticks. If you like, what's the time? Oh, the time. Okay, I'll show this. It's about 4 minutes. This explains.
Honey offers you smarter home insurance that helps prevent avoidable accidents in your home. And by reducing your risk with our smart sensors, you'll pay less for premiums.
There's no picture. There is a sound, but no picture.
All right. Okay, so I need to. There's so many steps in these things. So I've got that. Now we're interesting. I can't see it. Okay, I have to go and open it. Hang on. Don't tell me I've lost it. I seem to have lost it. Okay, I'll have to find it again. Okay. Somehow I lost it. Okay, ready? Yeah. And okay, I found it. Okay, shares. No, where the hell? Share screen. Oh, there we are. I think this is it. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Action. These instruments are commonly known as the didgeridoo. So when we go back to the Latin terminology, the didgeridoo in the Gaelic language, that's where the didgeridoo came from. In the Gaelic language of Scotland, they called it idgeridoo. Is that your idgeridoo, laddie? And that's what it means, simply means black man playing pipe. Because the same sequence that a bagpipe uses to play, we use the same sequence. But the only thing that makes it different is the pigskin. You blow into the pigskin, you squeeze the pigskin, and you release the air through the cords. That's with a Scottish bagpipe. Here in Aboriginal Australia, we do it with the power of the breath. The breath is most important. So when one of the early explorers traveled through the top end of Australia, they heard a noise in the bushes, simply saying, that's how it's got its name, didgeridoo. So here in Aboriginal Australia, we call these instruments Yiraki, Yigi Yigi, Matok, Ion Bilbil, Gurumuru Gambak Indaki Gandala. Simply means the voice of Mother Nature. We can't take all the credits for making these instruments. As you can see, it's a hollow log. And the white ants, we don't make it. The white ants eat the insides, then they leave their dirt, the deposits behind, and we'll push them out with our spears or longer sticks. And if it gets caught up in the middle, we'll shove hot coals down and burn them out that way. Then after we strip the bark out, we put native beeswax on, and it'll just stop our mouth from splitting. So how we play this instrument, vibration of the lips, gives you the first sound of the drone. Rolling your tongue using your voice box gives you another sound, which we call the call, like the kookaburra. Flicking your tongue makes the kangaroo hop. Using your diaphragm belongs to the emu. Then the hardest part is circular breathing. Breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth at the same time, and you'll have a constant airflow. So how we do circular breathing, if you hold air in your mouth, you can breathe in through your nose, right? Simply by making your mouth smaller, letting a little bit of air out, you can breathe in at the same time. Simply by doing that. But remember, the first step is the drone. Vibration of the lips. Rolling your tongue using your voice box. Then breathing in through your nose and your mouth. This is what it sounds like when you're playing at about 180 beats per minute.
$69 US Special Forces device turns men into beasts. This Marine Corps officer is bringing military technology to the public by inventing a device that emulates 54,000 crunches in 20 minutes and builds an incredible six-pack up to
Wow, I didn't know didgeridoo is so complicated. This was really nice.
What's that?
Might have seen him before.
Oh. No, I don't want that. All right, we're back now. Now, they also made toys. So,
Ben, we can't see you.
oh, can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see the PowerPoint.
Ah, okay, I have to share again. How's that? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can see the picture.
Wonderful. Okay. I must be getting old. I'm forgetting to do all the steps. Okay, so they have all these dolls. They have spinning tops. They have balls for the kids. Whatever our kids had, they made whatever they wanted. They had small scale and bigger scale. They even had little tools and weapons which the kids were playing with. The kids made toy propellers from strips of long leaves, and they had competitions of who can go the furthest. In North Queensland, the men had a game using spinning tops, using let's see, forest gourd, beeswax, bark fiber, and hardwood, so it was a game which who could do the best construction and as well as spinning. Now, when I was a kid, we had these tops with strings and a little point. Some of you might remember having that, playing with the spinning tops. Same thing. Now, they also had a very good awareness of genetics. And so traditional marriage was intertribal. So they knew that they should not have kids within the tribe. So there was potential of marriage between certain categories of people. And then they looked at kin, country, they had all sorts of other, there were people who knew all the information, and they said, yes, you can or should not get married together. So there were 4 parts, 4 elements to get married. They had to be eligible to be married according to the local rules. There were appropriate betrothal arrangements which had been made between the 2 kin, 2 groups. So what's new, right? An exchange of gifts ratified the contract. Actual marriage may be distinguished from the betrothal when the parties cohabit publicly and take on marital responsibilities, including sexual relations. And the union is considered to be strengthened by the birth of the first child. So when you have your first child, it's all fair income. And so it was a central feature in Aboriginal societies. And the need to maintain the population, of course, was important. And that was always someone had to attend the sites and keep up traditions. It was always matched, but the children were produced according to the right family groups and the correct affiliations. So the most important difference between Aboriginal marriage patterns and those of white Australia, the marriage is not seen as a contract between individuals, like we have here, but one which implicated the kin and country. So if you listen now to modern Aborigines saying they are such and such a people, they would talk about the people of the father and the people of the mother. They'd say, I don't remember the names, but I think you know what I mean. So usually 3 generations were involved. Girls were betrothed when they were very young, and marriages took place when they attained puberty. Males had to be in their 20s or 30s, and polygyny was allowed, so they had more than one wife. And divorce was by agreement of the couple and indicated by living apart. So there was no family law courts. There were hundreds of Aboriginal tribes and a large number of language groups, hundreds of them. They didn't develop any written language, and they relied completely on oral communication, which brings us to the idea of dream time. And it was used for many, many centuries to enable them to survive. It gave them the stories which they followed as a map, where they had to go to the next feeding area during a particular time of the year, where there was food in one area but not another area. So the stories usually refer to the geography that they moved through. The dream times also refer to the appearance of various stellar constellations. So they could look up and see the constellation in a particular part of the sky, and it let them know when about availability of particular plants and animals for food. So they were very, very clever in ways of moving around, and it's still used in sacred rituals and ceremonies. Now, with the dream time, I found these 2 stories. I put them in the notes, and each of those have got a couple of stories, dream time stories. Some of them are sort of animated. It's worth having a look if you've got the chance. And that brings us to the end. So there's a lot of stuff there that I hope you enjoy that. But go through some of the videos again if you like. You've got all the links are there for you in your notes. And that's it, I think. Are there any questions?
Ruben, I would like to congratulate you on an amazing presentation. A huge amount of research, and you've put it through so clearly. I've learned a lot more. You once gave this presentation about 3 years ago. It's so different. I can't even remember what was before, but it's all new. It's really quite good. It's amazing. Well done.
And I don't pay this fellow. Thank you. Thanks, Basil. Yeah. But you know what? If you're looking for, have an idea of what to look for, then you look and it's there. It's just a matter of sifting through the material and picking stuff that I think would be interesting for people to listen to. And
you know what's amazed me most is the playing of the didgeridoo. I never realized how complicated it is.
It is very difficult.
Amazing. And I don't even know how you can teach it.
You can. I went online and there was a short video on how to do it. So I tried it. I think I borrowed a didgeridoo from somebody some time ago, and I could do it, but I couldn't keep it up. It's very difficult. It's like all our Western blowing type instruments. You have to breathe, and they work out a system of not having to stop the music.
Well, it's using muscles that you normally use, you know, and building them up to an absolute crescendo.
Well, David here is a fantastic cornet player, and hey, David, what do you think of circular breathing? I can't hear you. Press a space bar. You can talk with the press space bar down.
I've never tried it.
Yeah, but what do you think of the idea of not having to take a breath? What, you know?
It'd be a lot easier than trying to take breaths.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be amazing. So you just keep playing without any breath spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Greg said he's a brass player from way back.
Not very skilled. I just played around a little bit.
Yeah, but you'll remember that you had to take a breath. Yeah. What did you play, by the way?
Me?
Yeah.
I've played cornet and tenor horn.
Ah, okay. About the same size mouthpiece. Yeah.
Similar, yeah.
Similar.
The tenor.
Yeah, a bit bigger. Yeah. So we have all sorts of talents around the place, and if anybody's interested in learning to play a brass instrument, we're going to be setting up a small brass school. Yeah, we've got 3 people who want to learn. Did you know that, David?
Is that likely?
I've still got to get. I need to find a teacher, and I need to get a grant to pay the teacher. So I don't know when, but hopefully soon. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know what I'm doing next time. I haven't thought. I've got it planned out, but I can't remember. And hopefully I'll see you guys, and maybe, as I said, I had a few apologies for today's session. I wish you all a Chag Sameach to the Jewish people, and a happy Christmas, and not Christmas, Easter, a peaceful Easter, and you an Easter type person. So we are, tomorrow night is the start of Passover, and then we have a few days of eating this biscuit stuff called matzah, which is very dry, Has little taste, but it's good fun. Makes a lot of crumbs. Sorry, Helena, press the space bar. Helena, press the space bar. Can't hear you. Press the space bar. I can't get the message across.
Don't worry.
Helena, press the space bar.
Oh yeah, can you hear me?
Now I can.
Oh yeah, that was the mute. I was muted.
Ah.
That's what it was. I couldn't find the space bar. Ruben, can I just drop in the drawing? I actually will drop it in. I've made it better.
Okay.
I drop it into the letterbox. What number was it? 8?
18A.
18. Okay, no problem.
No, 18A.
18A. Okay, I know.
It's at the back. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this amazing. I'd love to do it for my grandchildren to inform them about all this. Yeah, it'll be lovely.
Anyway, it's being recorded, so I'll.
Okay.
I'll put it up.
So when are we back on again? Like in 2 weeks? 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll be going. Yeah, we